Welcome to today's explainer. So, you know how we literally spend so much of our lives waiting for that one cinematic moment? Like, you know the exact one I mean. The music swells, your discipline suddenly just clicks into place, and all those hard things finally, magically, feel easy.
Oh, exactly. We're all waiting for this massive lightning bolt of inspiration that's just going to permanently fix us. But today, we're actually going to look at why that dramatic moment is, well, kind of a myth, and what really works instead. So let's dive right into this. We're going to trace the journey of someone we'll just call the student.
Now, for a really, really long time, the student was waiting for exactly that kind of breakthrough. He was hunting for this moment where motivation wouldn't just be a quick visitor, but would literally pack its bags and move in permanently. A time when progress would just be obvious, undeniable.
Right.
But the thing is, it never actually arrived. That magic switch, it never flipped. And what's so deeply fascinating about this whole story is that the realization that the breakthrough wasn't coming, that super painful, sobering moment, was actually, strangely enough, the exact moment when something real started to change for him.
It's wild, right? And the contrast between our societal expectations of momentum and the actual reality, it's just stark. Because most of us absolutely expect momentum to feel dramatic. We want it to be fast, super powerful, and immediately obvious to everyone around us.
Yeah, for sure. But the reality the student lived was the complete opposite. When momentum finally did show up, it was incredibly quiet, almost invisible, honestly. He wasn't suddenly waking up thrilled to tackle the day out of nowhere, and he definitely wasn't doing 10 times the work. Actually, most of his days still felt completely ordinary.
And to really understand how we got to that point, we kind of have to look at the low point he found himself in first. Section 1, the trap of starting over. See, the student wasn't failing because he wasn't trying. He was actually putting in a tremendous amount of energy. Yeah, the issue was totally about where that energy was going. He was stuck in this utterly exhausting loop. And honestly, it's a loop I think pretty much all of us can relate to whenever we try to rebuild our own habits or discipline.
Seriously, look at this. You can see how painfully familiar this sequence is. You start, you get really hyped up about a new plan, you actually make some decent progress, and then, boom, you hit a wall, fall off, and suddenly you have to restart the whole entire thing.
Oh, it is just so familiar. You ride the wave of that initial excitement, right? But the problem is, excitement isn't structural. It's just an emotion. And the second that emotion inevitably fades, the action stops. You fall off, and then you have to somehow generate all of that heavy starting energy from scratch all over again.
And here is the truly hidden cost of that whole cycle. Every single time the student restarted, he wasn't just back at square one. He was actually way further behind. Because constantly restarting, it quietly strips things away from you.
Exactly. You lose time, sure, but much more devastatingly, you lose your confidence. And you lose trust in yourself. Because when you keep promising yourself that, hey, this time will absolutely be different, and then it isn't, your brain literally stops believing your own promises. That slow erosion of self-trust is definitely the heaviest toll of all.
So the big question is, how do you break it? Let's move to section 2, the quiet shift. For the student, the actual turning point was remarkably understated. It wasn't fueled by some sudden burst of extreme motivation. It wasn't because he finally bought like the perfect planner or discovered a flawless productivity system.
No, not at all. And his life certainly didn't magically get any easier either. The shift happened simply because he made one fundamental decision. He just stopped abandoning the process. When things got boring or hard, or even if he completely messed up a single day, he just absolutely refused to throw the whole system out and start over. He just picked up exactly where he left off.
So the really crucial point here is how we define what was actually happening to him in that moment. Think about it this way. Momentum is simply when today's effort benefits from yesterday's effort. It's such a profound reframing. It really is. I mean, it's not about speed or intensity or having to be constantly productive. True momentum is just when your actions finally begin to compound. For the very first time in his life, the student's actions weren't just isolated little events. Yesterday actually mattered. The effort he put in a month ago was directly helping him today.
Which is huge because before this, the student had spent literally years searching in all the wrong places. He looked for motivation just to make the work feel good. He looked for strict structure to kind of force himself to do the work. He even looked for a new identity to pretend he was already the person doing the work.
Right. But what he didn't realize until right then was that all three of those massive searches were really just preparation. They were leading him to the only answer that actually holds any real weight, which is consistency. Because, let's be real, momentum is mathematically and practically impossible without consistency.
To really ground this kind of philosophical idea, the source text gives us this incredible physical metaphor. Imagine you're pushing a really heavy object. Think of like a completely stalled car or a massive boulder. When you first throw your whole weight against it, it barely even twitches.
Exactly. Every single push in the very beginning feels entirely ineffective. You are pouring all this energy in, sweating it out, and absolutely nothing seems to be happening on the outside. And tragically, this is exactly the spot where most people end up quitting.
They do. And they quit not because they are inherently incapable, but because they mistakenly equate slow progress with no progress.
And the student had made this exact mistake dozens of times before. He'd try a new system, judge it harshly after just 3 days, and throw it out. He'd start a new habit, judge himself after a week, and declare the whole thing a failure. He expected evidence of success way too quickly. And without that immediate proof, he just assumed absolutely nothing was working at all.
But the truth of the matter is, momentum heavily operates on a delay. First comes the effort. The results? Well, they come much later. And I think we really need to pause here and validate just how incredibly frustrating that delay can actually feel.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you are actively trying to rebuild your life. I mean, when you are putting in the grueling work every single day, trying your hardest to climb out of a hole, and your reality still looks exactly the same, it requires just an immense amount of faith to keep going when the results literally haven't shown up yet.
But if you can somehow survive that delay, well, that brings us to Section 3, which is really the emotional climax of this entire journey, rebuilding lost trust. Something incredibly strange and honestly beautiful happens when you simply decide to stay with the process long enough.
It's true. The whole internal landscape begins to change. You're no longer constantly fighting yourself at every single turn. That heavy, stubborn resistance just begins to soften.
And just the evolution of how that happens is totally fascinating. Actions that at first feel just agonizingly difficult gradually start to, well, just feel normal. And then from normal, they shift into actually being automatic.
Right. And eventually, those once painful routines embed themselves so incredibly deeply that they just become a part of your identity. That's exactly where the student finally found himself. He wasn't suddenly totally transformed, he wasn't magically finished, but he was fundamentally different. He wasn't relying on these occasional desperate bursts of effort anymore. He was relying entirely on repetition.
And here is the real prize in all of this. The student wasn't just building a standard productivity habit. He was actively rebuilding trust in himself. Every single kept promise became hard evidence. Think about just how powerful that really is. Every completed task became indisputable proof. Every single small, boring, mundane act of consistency actively strengthened a brand new belief in his own mind. He was literally proving to himself day by day that he was reliable.
Which means, thankfully, we can explicitly dismiss all those loud traditional goals that productivity culture is constantly trying to sell us. The actual foundation of momentum is not sheer, unwavering confidence, and it is certainly not endless, hyped-up motivation.
No, definitely not. Those things are incredibly fleeting. They come and go with the weather. The actual solid foundation is just trust. It's the trust that you'll keep showing up. The deep trust that having a bad day doesn't suddenly mean the entire process is ruined.
And that gradually builds into a belief that isn't some grandiose, I can conquer the world type of thing. It's something so much simpler. It's just, I can follow through. Let that profound simplicity just hang in the air for a second. I can follow through. Once you truly, deeply believe that about yourself because you have the undeniable evidence of your own daily actions to back it up, literally everything else becomes possible.
Which really brings us to our final realization today. Section 4, the power of ordinary days. Because true momentum isn't created by one single, flawless, spectacular day. No, it is created by many completely unremarkable days. Days that honestly seem entirely insignificant while you're actually living them. They really only reveal their actual value when you zoom way out and view them all strung together over months and even years. That right there is real progress, the kind that accumulates quietly and fundamentally changes a person before they even fully realize it's happening.
So after literally years of searching high and low for a magical, cinematic breakthrough, the student finally found the actual answer: repetition. And surprisingly enough, that was totally enough. The things that drastically change our lives are rarely ever dramatic. They're simply the things we do over and over and over again. Momentum isn't some secret you find hiding under a rock. It is absolutely something you build. One action, one habit, one single decision at a time.
Which leaves us with a really important question to reflect on as we wrap up. If real, lasting momentum is built entirely on the back of perfectly ordinary days,
What small promise are you going to keep to yourself tomorrow?
And remember, it doesn't need to be massive. It doesn't need to be loud or Instagram worthy. It just needs to be something you won't abandon. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. We really hope it helps you find the power in your own quiet consistency. See you next time.